This episode of The Spiritual Edge is brought to you by Templeton Religion Trust. We're changing the conversation about religion, together with you and all who are curious. Join the conversation at templetonreligiontrust.org.
From KELW and The Spiritual Edge, this is Becoming Muslim. Stories of Americans who've chosen Islam. I'm Hana Baba. I grew up with a brother who loved hip-hop, and I learned through him that many Black hip-hop artists were Muslim converts or came from Black Muslim communities. He introduced me to Mos Def, a.k.a. Yasin Bey, Q-Tip and Ali Shaheed Muhammad from A Tribe Called Quest, Rakim, all of those. And for some, they may have not worn it on their sleeves, but Islam showed up in their art. So here on the podcast, we knew that if we were going to tell stories of Black Muslims, we wanted to explore Black identity with someone with that background. We asked my colleague Imran Ali Malik who he'd want to profile, and he knew exactly the person.
It's Tyson Amir.
I don't focus a lot on what might or might not happen. We all gonna die. It's just the reality of the situation. But how are we gonna live? That is something that we do have some control over.
Tyson is an Oakland-based rapper, writer, and teacher. His path to Islam came out of the Black American experience.
I didn't have what people would consider traditional religion in my home. I'm surrounded by religious practices. The Black experience, there's a spirituality to that.
Tyson is talking about the Black American revolutionary spirit of the 1960s, but he's also talking about the spiritual struggles of his formerly enslaved ancestors. What are we looking at here? Tyson is carefully handling a large book. It's a family treasure.
This is the book that chronicles my family history on my father's side. So the title of it is History and Genealogy of Bartlett and Rowena Flemister.
Bartlett and Rowena were Tyson's great-great-great-grandparents. The bulk of what Tyson knows about his family history comes from the book he's holding. It was put together by his extended family in the early 1980s. There are hundreds of people listed in this book, who all trace their lineage back to this couple. The book is hardbound with green leather and embossed with gold letters. Under the title, it says, "I want my blood there on Judgment Day."
They put this on here because this is the tagline or the quote that they say my great-great-great-grandfather would always say. He would say, "I want my blood there on Judgment Day."
Tyson believes these words expressed his ancestors' longing to see justice for the crimes of slavery. The book is full of pictures and archival documents, and it begins with a harrowing tale of how Bartlett and Rowena Flemister survived slavery.
This is a very important story to me. In the late 1850s, Dr. Sweet, a calculating, enterprising businessman as well as a doctor, realizing a war between the states was an eventuality, began to sell his slaves. He sold Rowena and their oldest son, Charlie, for $1,500 to a plantation owner from Alabama. Charlie is my great-great-grandfather. So he separates my family right before the start of the Civil War.
For years, Charlie and Rowena remained separated from Bartlett and the rest of the family. When they were all eventually freed in 1863, Rowena and her son walked from Alabama back to Georgia, and by asking directions to the Flemister plantation, found their family again.
So then as the pages of the book go, here's the ancestry of Charlie Flemister. So he had 13 children. I am a descendant of him through his 8th child, Henry Luther Flemister. So this is my great-grandfather.
We sit for about an hour looking through the green book. I start to wonder how knowing this much about your ancestors' struggles would affect you as a person.
I can't tell you how many hours I've spent in this book because it meant and still means that much to me. I am waiting to be able to take this book from my father. He won't let me have it. This is my book.
Bartlett and Rowena's story survives because they lived to see emancipation and were able to prosper as free men and women. And their story continues to inspire Tyson and the rest of his family.
They acquired land. They fought to protect other people in the community. They were soldiers, bro. I come from that. That's dope. That's deep.
And then there's the detail in the book that is part of the reason we're telling you this story. By the family's account, Bartlett Flemister was a Muslim. This is remarkable. There were no mosques in the U.S. until the 20th century. It's only recently that historians have begun to uncover the history of Islam among enslaved Africans here. And yet, Tyson's family book shows that Islam, at least as an idea, did pass down through the generations.
I come from that, and that's such an important thing. The fact that my family has maintained, and I say that because I don't know. There's no way for us to really verify that, but that is the way that the story has been passed down to us. The fact that my family has maintained that my great-great-great-grandfather practiced Islam, that is important. I'm inspired by that.
Tyson and I are both part of a larger Oakland Muslim community, but before this story, we hadn't met personally. I called him up and told him I wanted to do a story about his conversion to Islam. He warned me that his wasn't a typical convert story. I guess he meant the kind where there's a single moment where everything changes. That's exactly why I was interested, I told him. Unlike Tyson, I was raised in Islam, the son of Pakistani immigrants. It wasn't until later in my life that I decided to formally study the faith. As I met a diverse group of Muslims, I grew fascinated by the many paths that people take to get to Islam and started investigating convert stories for my own podcast. A lot of times, those stories reflected my own, a personal, individualistic spiritual path. But Tyson's journey tells a different story entirely, one that has everything to do with the experience of being Black in America.
Sinbad Avenue, this is where it started.
He takes me to San Jose, to the neighborhood that his parents moved to in the late 70s, just before he was born. It's also where Tyson first encountered hip-hop as a kid.
This is where all of that began. I started rapping, breakdancing, all of that here. I remember, we could walk back down the street.
Tyson's wearing his usual outfit, black pants, black shirt, black beanie, and his custom varsity jacket. The street is lined with modest bungalows with short driveways.
I remember seeing folks with linoleum out, like putting that on the ground, and then pop locking, break dancing, back spinning, all of that right here. And then the older cats here, they rapping and break dancing. So we got it all from what we saw around us. And then we doing our little kid stuff too, running around playing. That was it.
Before they moved here, his parents were activists in Oakland. San Jose was where they chose to raise Tyson and his older sister. They were one of the only Black families in a mostly Latino neighborhood. His father taught at the local school, and his mother worked at a dentist office. So Tyson and his sister spent a lot of time with the elderly neighbor across the street. It was pretty idyllic until the crack epidemic hit.
We didn't ask for it. This stuff came into the neighborhoods. It came into the places that we lived in. And some of us made decisions that we felt were best to survive.
Some of the older kids and fathers started disappearing. They were recruited by gangs, lost to violence, addiction, or life in prison. And even young kids like Tyson experienced traumas that would change them forever.
I had a friend, I'm 10 years old.
The friend was 10 years old too. One night, he started drinking with his older siblings and ended up dead.
That hit me, bro. I'm a kid, you feel me? The end of this person has just happened. I didn't understand that. I remember that vividly as a moment where whatever I thought was my childhood, that ending, and then having to step into a deeper understanding of the world and the consequences of decisions and all of that.
Tyson remembers this as the first moment when he started to ask the bigger questions.
Religious understanding, higher power, heaven, hell conversation, what's going to happen after this life.
Not long afterwards, Tyson's parents decided to sell their home and moved across town to a 2-story home in a cul-de-sac. His parents still live there.
Hey, Mama. This is my mother. How you doing, Mama?
I'm good. How are you?
Walking through the foyer, I immediately notice a theme of African cultural artifacts. Tribal masks and woven farmer hats with intricate patterns hanging on the wall.
Here in San Jose, it's not that many African-American people. And the few that we knew, we all felt the same way, like our kids aren't getting their information. So we would have Sunday classes, and we would have lessons. We'd take them on field trips, and that's how they got to understand who they were as people.
We sit at the kitchen table and talk about her upbringing in the South and how she came to Oakland and met her husband. He was a member of the Black Panther Party, the famous group founded there in response to police violence in 1966. She volunteered for their free breakfast program, feeding kids in black neighborhoods before school. Her stories reminded me of something that Tyson had mentioned about the house, a special room called the Black Room.
What is this, the Black Room?
Tyson, you want to take him to the Black Room?
This right here, look at this.
When they moved into the house, they had this extra bedroom. Tyson's parents filled it with posters of black icons: Angela Davis, Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, a picture of the famous 1968 Olympics Black Power salute. For Tyson, this room, similar to the book about his enslaved ancestors, had a huge impact.
So I'm seeing history and people and revolutionary struggles from all over the world in my very home.
It's also where his journey to Islam began. He became fascinated by the life of Malcolm X.
Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man?
I decided I wanted to follow the path of Malcolm very, very early on. So whatever I can learn about his path, what helped build him, became part of me.
Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind?
Hi, this is Judy Silber, executive editor of The Spiritual Edge. We'll get back to the story shortly, but I'm here to remind you that more stories from the Becoming Muslim series are available by looking for The Spiritual Edge in your podcast player. Or you can go to our website, thespiritualedge.org. That's also where you can donate to the project. We're so proud of the Becoming Muslim series, but this kind of journalism isn't cheap. Believe it or not, we started planning back in 2017, and it took a whole team to make it happen. If you appreciate this kind of sensitive, in-depth storytelling, please consider making a donation. We are committed to bringing you more thoughtful journalism about religion and spirituality, but we need your help. So go to our website, thespiritualedge.org, and make a donation today. We appreciate your listening and your support. Now back to the story.
And so I remember deciding, probably like around the age of 10 or 11, I'm like, oh, Malcolm was in the Nation of Islam. I know in the nation they don't eat pork. I won't eat any more pork. Simple as that.
His mother remembers how intense he was, even at that age.
We were at a sports banquet. He was getting this award. And before we got ready to eat, the pastor wanted to do the blessing. And everybody bows their heads but my son.
She cups her hands to simulate the way Muslims pray.
And I told my husband, go, look, there's our little Muslim. That's what he did. And I said, that's who he is.
In my young mind, the most powerful image or representation that I saw of blackness and like an unapologetic revolutionary approach was that of Malcolm. And Malcolm was amazing and still is to this day. And so the calculus in my mind was whatever produced him, I need to be connected to.
And that included Malcolm's faith. Still, it would be years before Tyson took his Shahada and officially became Muslim. I asked about that moment many times, and every time I asked, Tyson deflected. It was clear he was trying to steer me away from telling his story that way. His conversion didn't come from a period of spiritual searching, the way it does for many converts. From the beginning, this was about joining the ranks of Black Muslim freedom fighters that came before him. Tyson wanted me to understand that his conversion wasn't about soul searching. It was about placing himself in the struggle.
So your spirituality can be part of your political activism. They don't have to be separate boxes. It's like, all right, I'm going to step into my political activist, organizing revolutionary box, and that means I'm not in my spiritual box anymore. It's not that. So in what I have experienced as part of the Black experience, the spiritual, the political, the revolutionary, the artistic, the creative, it's all intertwined.
When Tyson went to college at San Jose State University, he started writing poetry and rapping. He'd always been quiet and introverted, but on the mic, he let out a huge personality. He started meeting other Muslims at the mosque and cultural events.
So as I'm coming up and I'm rhyming, I'm seeing the folks before me doing that. And then I really don't know exactly when, but there was this poetry thing.
There was a burgeoning scene of Muslim hip-hop artists in the Bay Area at the time, and they were determined to not rely on the commercial music industry for their success. Tyson joined forces with a DJ and another rapper to form a group called 1159. Their lyrics reflected a strong sense of Islamic spirituality while also being true to their own experiences as Black Americans. The group traveled around the United States and to Muslim lands abroad. Tyson's travels broadened his understanding of the world and his faith, as he met all kinds of people that claim a relationship to Islam.
We thought that with this unifying tool of Islam, that people would be able to see beyond some of the things that colonization, imperialism, just the global system of racism have thrown into each of us, regardless of where we are on the planet.
He and his bandmates felt that the Black American struggle held lessons for Muslims all over the world. They toured for years, but eventually the band dissolved, and Tyson's focus turned back home. His relationship to religion shifted too. He became less concerned with connecting with Muslims abroad and more attuned to the struggle that brought him into the faith to begin with.
So we sliding through West Oakland right now. We sliding through Panther territory.
This is February 2020, just a month before things closed down because of the coronavirus pandemic. Tyson and I are driving around old Black Panther landmarks in Oakland.
Have you been to West Oakland like this?
Not with a tour guide.
That's all good. I don't know if I'm a tour guide, but I'll point out a few things. So right now, we're at 14th and Peralta. So West Oakland is the official home of the Black Panther Party.
I'd passed these streets countless times, but hadn't known the history. I began to sense the enormity of the struggle that weighs on Tyson. 50 years ago, young Black people organized on these streets to stand up to police brutality.
But for real, like, this is what we see right here, man, like what we driving through. These are the streets that those brothers and sisters were on. This is where they was pulling their first recruits, and that was it. This is what produced that, which produced a movement that had an impact all throughout the United States and beyond. That's powerful, man.
These days, Tyson spends his time trying to live up to this history. He's writing, teaching, and organizing in the Black community.
I don't waste no lines. I don't waste no words. Everything has a meaning. It has an intention. It has a purpose.
This is sound from a video of Tyson teaching. The desks are arranged in a circle, and the students watch him intensely.
So if there's something that you see and you're like, what does that mean? Why did you say that? We're going to break it down after, okay? So we're going to take this line by line. Y'all good? Y'all ready? Yep. Okay, so this is between Huey and Malcolm.
Tyson starts to read one of his poems. Huey P. Newton was a founder of the Black Panther Party.
The Dr. Huey P. Newton had an epiphany once, and then he said, I don't expect the white media
to create positive black male images. So he wouldn't be surprised to see how evening networks accumulate their net worth of billions off assassinating the character of our children.
It's from a book he published called Black Boy Poems. He uses it in a curriculum he's developed. It's designed to teach black students the revolutionary history of the 1960s.
There ain't no revolutionary curriculum that people are being exposed to that is put out by the state of California or any other state that we're talking about. They're not doing that. They're not going to give you information that's going to lead you to fighting for your freedom and liberation.
He wants the students to see themselves in that history, the way that the Green Book about his ancestors and the black room in his house did for him as a kid. This is how Tyson described himself in our first interview. I'd asked him to tell me his name and what he does.
Some people call me an author, some people call me an MC, some people call me a poet, some people call me an educator, an activist, an organizer, so many different things. Freedom fighter is first.
He was raised to see himself as part of the continuation of the struggle that began with the ancestors of his ancestors, who were brought in bondage and forced to labor on these lands. They lost their languages, their traditions, and of course, their religious knowledge. Everything Tyson does today is about his connection to this community, to his forebears, to fallen leaders. It's what informs his music, his writing, his teaching. It's why today, if he's not working, he's volunteering and organizing. This is what Tyson wants me to understand, that his choice to be Muslim is at the heart of his revolutionary stand against a history of oppression.
Man, I guess we back to rhyming again. America got us dying again. Eternal flame stay lit, that's that fire within. We see the devil in his truest form, cause he ain't even hiding his sin. We claim no easy victories, meaning that we grind to the end. The only option is we fight till we win. Them politicians playing their position, standing in front of them television cameras.
To be respected as a human being, to be given the rights of a human being. In this society, on this earth, in this day, which we intend to bring into existence by any means necessary. That's it. Right on. What stood out? Would you underline? Would you highlight? Let's talk about it. Okay, I got you, then I got you next.
Thanks to Imran Ali Malik for bringing us that story. Make sure to check out his podcast, American Submitter. On the next episode of Becoming Muslim, a young woman ventures into unexpected territory.
One time this guy, I don't want to call him a racist, came up to me and he's like, "Hey, you, go back to your country." And I was like, "Okay, I'm here. Who's talking?"
That's next time on Becoming Muslim. Becoming Muslim is a project of the Spiritual Edge podcast at KALW Public Radio. Support for the series comes from the Templeton Religion Trust. Jeb Sharp is the editor, Tariq Foda is the sound engineer, Lindsay Myers-Humley is the digital content manager, Tom Levy is the photographer, our executive editor is Judy Silber. Thanks also to Katie McCutcheon and Jad Khalil for help with research for the series. We're grateful to the experts who helped us along the way, including Edward Curtis, Juliette Gallonier, Zarina Grawal, Sajida Jalalzai, Hind Mekki, Bashir Mohammed, Harold Morales, Spirit, and Kayla Wheeler. Pod Ops by Megan Jones. Jeffrey Burke-Witten did our logo. Thank you to Ben Trefny, the news director at KALW, and to Matt Martin, who helped conceive of the series. To hear more stories from this series, check out our complete archive, including other stories about religion from around the world at thespiritualedge.org. We're also on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks for listening. I'm Hana Baba.